How will you get what you want in bed if you don't even ask for it? Communication can feel really tricky and challenging, and that's why we're out here in nature to strip it right back. In this session, we'll be looking at some of those foundational tools as well as giving you heaps of exercises so you can put it all into practice. Often, being in nature or out of your home, out of your regular space is a great place to have these more challenging conversations. And it was actually really interesting speaking to the team at Unyoked. They said that a lot of couples book in a cabin and some time away so that they can have the more challenging conversations that don't feel accessible or possible at home. So if you're in a similar space, it may be worth thinking about how you can get into a new context to have these conversations. And there is a bit of a framework that I like to follow because a lot of my clients will say, I want the exact way to approach this. How do I have the conversation? What is a specific thing that I can say? So first up, I encourage everyone to do their own research. Really think about what is this thing that you want to discuss? Is it an activity? Is it something you're wanting more of or less of? Is it something that you're wanting to explore or bring to the relationship? Come with as much information as possible so that your partner can then make an informed decision. Another thing to think about is the context. I never recommend having these more challenging or edgy conversations about sex or relationships directly before, during, or after sex, as it can feel a little bit too vulnerable. Instead, think of a space that feels safe and comfortable and free from distraction. I always like to frame these conversations with a little bit of positivity, a reminder that there's nothing wrong with your partner necessarily. They're not a bad lover. It's just that you're wanting to explore something new. So you may remind them how attracted you are to them, how much you love them, what all the good bits are in the relationship. And then following it up with the things that could improve. So is it a way that you want to be touched? Is it something that you want to experience that's new? Is it something that they could bring to the relationship? This is the part where you can be really descriptive and give them that information. Follow that up with a reminder that you love them, they're great, the relationship's great, so they don't feel like it's all doom and gloom. They may also need some time to think about this. They may want to get their own information, ask their own questions. And if that's the case, maybe you agree to take some space to think about it and agree at a time that you're going to come back and continue the conversation. And if it's a yes, awesome, go and do that new thing. But if it's a no, it's really important that you show them that you respect them and you accept their boundary. And it may also be a useful piece of information for you to decide what you need to do next to ensure that you are still fulfilled in sex and in your relationship as well. This is a really great framework to follow anytime you're having a conversation about sex, but actually this can be applied to conversations in general, whether it's about life or work or your relationship, using this as a step-by-step process so that you feel really fulfilled in everything you're doing. There's often a really heavy focus on how we verbally communicate with people. And yes, that is incredibly important, but actually the majority of our communication is done with non-verbal communication. So how we're listening to someone, our posture, where we're looking, our gaze, our responses, our gestures. So it may be useful to pause this video now and to discuss with each other. How can we show each other that we're listening, we're attuned, and we're present with our body language? How would you like your partner to respond in the way that they hold their body or certain gestures that they make? But then you may also let them know how you like to communicate non-verbally, so you're both aware of different tools that you can use when it comes to this conversation about sex. A really common thing I hear, and you may also relate to this as well, is that couples will identify there's just so much pressure when it comes to talking about sex. And when I hear this, I want to work with them to find ways to take pressure off the cards. And more often than not, I will set them a challenge to actually not have sex in the way that they've been having it for an agreed amount of time, and instead start to get more creative with the ways that they want to be sensual and intimate with each other. And I know that may sound a little bit counterintuitive, like a couple is coming to see a sex coach to improve their sex life, and a sex ban may not necessarily be what they're wanting to engage with. But I can also see it visibly taking the pressure off them, a sense of ease in their body that they can start to maybe redefine sex. One really tangible activity that I like to go through as a way to see how creative they can be when it comes to sex and intimacy is to create a bit of a sex menu. So on this sex menu, they may have things like kissing, touching, massage, movement, dancing to an erotic song, writing something for each other, jumping in the shower. Whatever it is, they are essentially recreating their definition of sex. And in those moments when they're wanting to connect, to be sensual or to be intimate, rather than reverting to naked bodies and it ending in orgasm, they'll look at this list and think, okay, how about we just kiss with tongue tonight on the couch? And that's what we'll celebrate as our moment of sensual intimacy. All of this is done to redefine intimacy, to co-create a definition of sex that works for the couple that are present with me in session. And often a lot of the stress that comes with sex is about it being really focused on orgasm. People will say it's only a good experience if they've come, or they won't want to engage in sex because they have so much fear around not being able to experience orgasm or orgasming too quickly. And actually, I know that sometimes this can be a little bit easier said than done, because we've received messages for many, many years that sex is about bodies and sex ends in orgasm. What I'll invite my clients to do is to start looking at their sex values. So essentially, I'll draw a circle and I'll put the word orgasm in it. And I'll say, currently, you are valuing sex as being all about orgasm. And that's great. You know, we want to celebrate pleasure. We want to celebrate orgasms. However, what would it look like if we were to draw another circle and just divide this into a little bit of a pie chart and add orgasm into one of those quadrants and say, you know, we are still valuing orgasm. It's still obviously really important to you. However, what could we put in the rest of this pie chart so we can start to look at your other sex values? And that might be you have sex because it's fun, because it's pleasurable, because it's a way to connect with your partner that you don't connect with anyone else, because you love them, because there's sensation involved or power dynamics. This sex values chart will be really different for everyone. But perhaps you pause this video now, you draw out your chart and you look at where you can put your values. And in those moments that sex doesn't end in orgasm or it doesn't involve naked bodies, you can still look at this pie chart and say, we've had a pretty good sexual experience that aligns with our sex values. A reminder that getting out in nature and being on holiday can be the perfect context to have more tricky conversations. However, it is also the perfect time to do fuck all. So if you're just wanting space to rest, to reconnect, to be playful with each other, prioritize that and come back to these conversations at a time that does feel more useful for you. I find that often a really great conversation starts with a really great question, but the majority of people aren't actually asking great questions. So a few years ago, I developed this game I call speed relating, and it's pretty simple. Basically, you set a timer for 1 minute and one person will ask a question and the other person will have a minute to answer it. And essentially you ping pong back and forth, asking and listening to these questions about sex, intimacy, and relating. But an interesting piece of feedback we got from our community was that they find having conversations about sex a little bit easier when they've got something tangible to play with, which is exactly why we designed the Sync set. This was actually designed for everyone, whether you're in a relationship or not, but it includes a range of questions on all things sex, pleasure, relationships, bodies, and dating, and is the perfect start to a really great conversation. In this session, we've looked at how to create the context for a great conversation about sex or relationships. We've examined verbal and non-verbal communication skills. We've looked at how you can take the pressure off when everything feels like it's getting a little bit too tricky. And now it's your chance to go and put it all into practice and make sure you do those exercises because, of course, we learn by doing.